Hey, Charlie Crimebuster here. Let me ask you a question. Just what does cheesy eggs and the Superbowl have to do with picking a jury in the Chad Daybell case? Well, you're going to find out all about that on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. That and a whole lot more on this episode of what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to this, another episode about the grave digger. We're talking about Chad Daybell. His trial began this past week. They're picking the jury. And boy, as I've told you all along, this is a doozy. The bell has rung now for round two. That's right, round two concerning the prosecution of these two people, most responsible for the deaths of at least four people. And it's all taking place in Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho. Now, prosecutors are going all out with even the death penalty on the line in the trial of Daybell. Now, of course, Daybell has pleaded not guilty. He faces murder and conspiracy charges in the same way as his brand new wife, Lori Daybell, faced in her trial. Now, she was sentenced to multiple life terms in prison just last year for her charges regarding murdering the two children and conspiring to murder Daybell's previous wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, the pending charges will no doubt be brought up on her and Chad's involvement also in the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. We're going to talk all about that in a moment. But right now, I'd like to take a moment to welcome you to this particular episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Every week, we have brand new listeners to our podcast family. We have new people who join us on the Charlie Crime train, and we appreciate each and every one of you. As we've said often, the thousands of downloads humbles us, and it gives us a great deal of satisfaction in knowing that we're producing such information that you're finding helpful as you follow true crime. So we'd like to invite you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you like to support the program, go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. You can become a badge, BADGE supporter. And your support not only helps this podcast, but it also helps us help the men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We're talking, of course, about law enforcement, first responders, and the brave men and women of the military. You can read all about how we are involved in helping those, and you can help us as well by becoming a badge supporter. You read all about that at peacemakernetwork.com. Now, if you'd like to know more about other podcasts that we have produced, then we encourage you to go to our website, Charlie Crimebuster it's actually just charliecrimebuster.com. That's right, charliecrimebuster.com. Just hit that link and get right on over there. By the way, we always make this a little bit easier for you. You don't have to remember all that I shared with you just a moment or two ago. Because if you go to show notes, we're going to have links. Links to all those things I just shared. Yep. Links to how you can reach me with an email. Links to how you can go to peacemakernetwork.com. And a link, of course, on how you can get to the website. So please reach out with a shout out. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure on your favorite podcast platform that you take the time to subscribe. Now, this trial, of course, is going to be a doozy, and it's probably going to be a long one that could last for 2 months or more. And again, it's happening there in Boise, Idaho. Now, if you'd like to follow the trial yourself, it is being live streamed. Get this, on the judge's YouTube channel. That's right, the judge's YouTube channel. Seems like everyone has one of those these days, doesn't it? And if you happen to be traveling to or in that area where the trial is, well, the proceedings are open to the public. But hold on, you have to grab a reservation online. Now, keep in mind also that the charges against Chad are not the same charges as those of Lori's in her trial. That is, even though the couple were indicted together in May of 2021, well, those cases are now split, and there are some differences in the accusations that you're going to find. There's also differences in the penalty stages that we're going to talk to you about in a moment. Now, also, we'd like you to know that after the verdict of Lori Daybell, the judge said some pretty strong things about this tragedy. This, by the way, is the same judge that's handling this trial. Here is what he said after Lori was found guilty in her trial. After the verdict, the judge then described this tragedy. He said, and I quote, "While the couple honeymooned in Hawaii, the two children were left in shallow graves in Idaho. They were left there, burned, mutilated, and dismembered, and then buried like animals. And even then, Lori did not report her children missing, but kept collecting benefit payments on their behalf." Now, Lori was also found guilty of conspiring to murder Tammy Daybell. At first, Tammy's death was attributed to natural causes, but later, after more evidence surfaced, it too was a homicide. Now, no doubt, in this trial, you're also going to hear about zombies. That's right, zombies. Now, zombie, this is a person that Chad Daybell described as a person who has been taken over by dark spirits and could only be released through physical death. Well, I'm telling you, folks, lots of crazy things in this trial for sure, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment, including what cheesy eggs and Superbowl has to do with this trial. But now it's time for what we call our Crazy Crook Story. It's a Crazy Crook story that we share to sort of lighten the load in our reporting. So my friend, here now is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook Story of the week. Now, it is perhaps comforting in a bizarre way that not all crazy crooks come from our state of Florida, or even from the United States. Yep, from that little pond between us and across the ocean, well, there comes a guy by the name of Andrew Hennels, Hennels. He's 32 years of age. Now, get this crazy crook, he used Facebook to post 3 words. He said these 3 words, quote, "Doing Tesco over." 3 words, "Doing Tesco over." He posted that on his Facebook entry at 7:25 p.m. on the 13th of February. But there in his country in Northwich Crown County, well, they heard that he was nabbed with a knife just 15 minutes later with 410 francs. This was in the Gaywood area of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. Even the police could see the craziness in this crazy crook's action. In fact, Sergeant Pete Jessup, he stated this, quote, "It is a bizarre and unusual case." Now, you see, Andrew Hennels, he was actually filmed by CCTV at that Tesco store. And the court, they heard all about how Andrew Hennels stole a car from a couple who were using that cash machine at Tesco. Now, a member of the public had reported seeing a man with a knife demanding cash from a member of the staff, too, at the Tesco there on St. Faith's Drive. Hennels, of course, stole that car from that retired couple who had stopped to use the cash machine, and then he fled, of course, of all places, to a nearby pub. But Sergeant Jessup said that Hennels' Facebook confession now had made it a whole lot easier to secure a guilty plea, which was entered in March. He said, quote, "The pictures and posts on Facebook." You see, he not only gave those words, "doing Tesco" now, but he also said, this, with his picture, there was a knife. And the pictures and the posts on Facebook helped us confirm what we already knew. Now, he went on to say that none of this craziness takes away from the seriousness of the crime or the trauma that was experienced by the victims. And Judge Anthony Bate, in the sentencing, he said that Hennel, he posed a high risk of serious harm to the public. And this guy from Riverview Way in Gaywood, Norfolk, he's going to spend at least 4 years on extended license even after his release from jail as a part of his sentence. And his sentence, He is due to be sentenced this very month. He also admitted carrying a knife as an offensive weapon. So my friend, this crazy crook, who posted his intentions complete with a selfie picture of himself and a knife, he is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crook of the week. Well, now back to our main focus, the trial of Chad Daybell. This week kicked off the selection process regarding the jury. And while some people might find this process kind of boring, well, there are several things you can pick up during the process of selecting the jury. Now, there will be a total of 18 jurors that will be picked. There are going to be 12 jurors. There are going to be 6 alternates. And there are several ways that a participant, my friend, can be excused from serving on the jury. Now, we found that to be true as they selected the jury this past week. One of the most common ones is a hardship. And most of the hardship cases, well, they usually regard the employment of certain jurors. Some were involved in their work to the point that serving on the jury would negatively affect their jobs or their businesses. And others had other responsibilities that would not allow them to serve, like taking care of children. One had a wedding to attend, a wedding that had already been set, that already bought the plane tickets, and so they, of course, were excused. Now, for the most part, it appeared to me that during the selection, that the court was pretty lenient and pretty understanding and dismissed such jurors. Others were dismissed because they had seen and heard too much and had already formulated their own opinion before the trial. Hey, by the way, one such juror listened to a podcast that she described, and according to our own producer, James Buckland, he said it sounded a whole lot like she had heard a Charlie Crimebuster podcast. So you see, my friend, another benefit of listening to Charlie Crimebuster, well, just maybe, you might be able to get out of serving on a jury. But there are 3 main things that stood out to me in the jury process. First, there was much review about how the jurors felt about the death penalty. That's because that's on the line here in this trial. You see, most all the potential jurors were all questioned about how they felt about the death penalty. And those, my friend, who definitely opposed the death penalty and would not vote for the death penalty, any way they would not vote for the death penalty, well, they, of course, were excused from the jury. So in this trial, you see, prosecutors must not only pick a jury that will look to the evidence, but also such jurors who are willing to sentence the accused to death if found guilty. By the way, could you do that? Think about it. And even the defense, well, they listen very closely to these participants and how they, too, respond to the question of the death penalty. That, of course, is to rule out any potential aggressive juror that might be bent on prosecution. All right, now let's talk about those things we talked about at the very beginning. I'm talking about cheesy eggs and the Superbowl. Yep, cheesy eggs. You see, one of the lawyers, when speaking to the jury, she talked about fixing cheesy eggs for her daughter. You see, the idea is that in preparing meals, you do not always use the same recipe. Some people might like cheese in their eggs, some people may not. In other words, if the jury does not hear all about the case that they think they ought to hear, you see, some things may be left out. Some things may be added. And to some of the jurors, they may think that if they didn't get all the evidence that they wanted to see, or that certain things were shared that they didn't think was really evident to the case, they would think that that would maybe say to them that they should vote one way or the other. And so what they're very cleverly trying to plant into the minds of these jurors is that they should weigh only the facts that are brought up before them. It is a very clever way of planting the seed that before the evidence is presented, so that the jury will weigh on the evidence that is presented, regardless if they think more should be shared or some should be spared. I think a good example of that is the Casey Anthony case. You see, some jurors thought they could not vote guilty because they did not know exactly how little Kaylee had died. You see, her body had been left too long in the old Florida swamp to know exactly how she was murdered, even though it was apparent that she was murdered, and to me, it was apparent who did the killing. You see, in the same way, the bodies of these children, in this case, they were burned, mutilated, and buried for 8 months before we even knew where the children were. You see, we may not know exactly how they died, but it is evident that they were killed. Cheesy eggs. You see, some things we may not know, but that doesn't mean that we would basically vote innocent. You see, it's simply this. The recipe is not always the same every time. There are cheesy eggs, and then there are eggs just for breakfast. Now, the next example, believe it or not, was one of the Super Bowl. The lawyer asked the jury, if the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl, do they think that everyone on the team deserves a Super Bowl ring, regardless of how long they played or how good they played, or even if they did not get into the game? And all agreed that the whole team deserved the ring. Why? Because they all participated. The whole team participated. You see, that's a very clever way to get into the heads of the jurors again, of what it means to be guilty of a conspiracy. You may not have done the initial killing, but you participated. And your participation could lead to the deaths of others. You see, these were two very clever ways that the jurors were questioned in the picking of the jury this week. So while we are still in the closing stages of picking the jury, what else can we expect from this trial? What else are we going to see? Well, I will tell you all about that in a moment. But right now, it is time for a very helpful part of our podcast. That is when our producer, James Buckland, shares what I call news you can use. And he brings it with a scam alert. So here, my friend, is James Buckland with our scam alert of the week.
Thank you, Charlie Crambuster. This week's scam alert comes courtesy of the Florida Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. Have you ever received a text message that says that your Amazon package is undeliverable? Sound familiar? Well, the scammers are texting numbers pretending to be delivery services such as Amazon, the Postal Service, or FedEx with messages that says something like this. An attempt has been made to deliver your package. Please click the link below to reschedule your delivery. And they hope you'll be concerned enough to stop and click without really thinking. But if you click the link to verify the information necessary to have your package delivered, well, the scammers have just stolen your identity. So here's what we recommend. When you get a text with a link, don't click it. Just call or go to the website of the delivery service to verify that there is a problem with your package. You see, at Charlie Crambuster, we strive to keep you safe.
Thank you, James. These are always right on target, and they're most helpful. Well, now let's get you ready for the trial. First, there's a legal timeline, so you can know how this has proceeded through the courts. On August the 3rd and the 4th of 2020, there was first a preliminary hearing. That preliminary hearing bound both Chad and Lori over for the trial in the accusation of being a part of the deaths of these people. And then on February 2021, you see, Tammy Daybell, who was at first reported to die of natural causes, well, they exhumed her body. And as a result of that, we know now she did not die of natural causes. Rather, she was asphyxiated. It was a homicide. And then on August the 5th, 2021, well, the death penalty, it was filed to prosecute, get this, them both. The death penalty was on the table for both of them. In September of 2021, well, Chad's kids then went on TV. They actually went on TV with an interview to say that their dad had been framed, that this crazy family of Lori Daybell, actually Lori and Alex Cox, their brother, they all were the people that were responsible for this death. And their father, well, he was just duped. He was just brought in on this, and it was framed so it would all fall on him. That's what the kids said in September 2021. Might be a preview into the defense. that you're going to see in this trial. Now, on October the 5th, they actually had a change of venue, and they moved it from Fremont County. And then on March the 2nd, they were both to be tried together, but on March the 2nd, the trials were severed. In other words, it was split. Lori's going to be tried, and Chad's going to be tried. Not together, but separate. You see, now, Lori's lawyers, they were requesting a speedy trial. They wanted to push this along quickly. But Chad's lawyers, they wanted a delay. And so, my friend, there was a delay that was involved. But because of this delay now, you see, there's something else that came into the play. Because of this delay, and because of the fact that Lori wanted to go ahead much quicker than the prosecution planned, where the prosecution had to throw a whole bunch of evidence into discovery at the last moment. And because they did that, then Chad's lawyers, they pounced on that fact. Or rather, Lori's lawyers, not Chad's lawyers, but Lori's lawyers pounced on that fact to say, this is not fair. You should at least take the death penalty off if we're getting this discovery this late in the game. And the judge agreed. So the death penalty was taken off of Lori's case because discovery came so close to her trial. So on May the 12th then, after the trial began for Lori, she was found guilty. And on July the 31st of 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison. So keep in mind, one other thing I should bring out. In January 2024, to the surprise of many of us, John Pryor, who happens to be Chad's attorney, he asked to withdraw from the case. He did not want to be his attorney anymore. But guess what the judge said? The judge said, no way, Jose. Nope, you're there, man. You're going to defend him. So there is kind of a timeline of the legal parts of this case. Now let me clarify for you what the charges are that Chad is really actually facing. He's facing 3 counts of first-degree murder, and those 3 victims are Tammy Daybell, his last wife, J.J. Vallow, little J.J., and Tylee Ryan. J.J., of course, was 7 years of age, and Tylee she was just about to turn 17 years of age. Now, he's also facing 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. Again, because they are alleging that he conspired with Lori and Alex Cox to do these murders. Again, the victims, Tammy, JJ, and Tylee. And in addition to that, he's also facing 1 count of insurance fraud. Because get this, he actually, less than 1 month before his wife died, he increased the life insurance from the very minimum to the maximum. Hey, I bet that causes you to remember something else if you've been listening to Charlie Crimebuster, right? Yep, you got it. You got it. Yep. In the past trial of Lori, remember we told you all about this? She thought that she was going to be the beneficiary to her past husband, Charles Vallow. And my friend, that was $1 million payout. However, little did she know that because of her suspicious behavior, and because he really feared for his life and the safety of the children, he had changed the beneficiary to his sister. By the way, his sister was the same one who actually brought this whole thing into light because she reported the children were missing. This was after Charles was shot and dead. Now, Tammy, unfortunately, she did not have that warning. And Chad collected all the insurance money on his wife. And he is now charged with insurance fraud. Now, there's something else that I want to tell you about this trial. You can, as I stated earlier, you can follow this trial in real time because it's going to be broadcast live. That's right, live. And you know, my friend, I think that's a good thing. Now, a little before the trial, Chad's lawyer had given an interview to the news, and the judge had put on a gag order. Can't talk about it anymore. You see, the judge was afraid it might taint the jury that they were selecting. But even though he did that, even though he placed a gag order on that, well, this trial, my friend, It's going to be streamlined at the judge's YouTube channel. Actually, lots of places you're going to be able to watch it. You can just Google Streamline of Chad Daybell's trial, and you'll find plenty of opportunities to watch this trial. And I think that's good, my friend. I think it's good because it brings it to light. You see, my friend, this is not the prosecutors against Chad Daybell. Get this. This is the people against Chad Daybell. Don't ever forget that. This is the people that are prosecuting Chad Daybell. And because the people are prosecuting Chad Daybell, using the prosecutors to do that, I think the people deserve to know what's going on, don't you? I think if you bring it to light, there is transparency. And if there is transparency, there is, of course, trust. And so I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we can watch this trial in real time. And, of course, if you cannot watch, then we just encourage you to stay tuned to our podcasts. We're going to keep you updated weekly on the trial. Now, let's talk about how long this trial will last. Well, it depends. You can probably count on 8 to 10 weeks. It will probably go a lot longer than Lori's did, because you see, in this trial, the death penalty is on the table. And there's already been and will be plenty of questions to jurors about the death penalty. But there are 2 additional reasons why this trial, I believe, will go longer. You see, not just the question of the death penalty, but if Chad is found guilty by the jury, then immediately the jury will go into a second part of the trial. It's called the death penalty part. It'll be another mini trial that'll go on to see if the jury will vote for the death penalty. You can imagine that Chad's attorneys, if he is found guilty, will bring on all kinds of people saying what a great guy he was and how he helped this person, helped that person, this sort of thing. And then, of course, the prosecutors are going to come on with their people and say what a bad guy this is. And they're going to go back and forth. And then the jury's going to determine whether this person who had been found guilty, if he's found guilty, should deserve the death penalty or not. Now, there's another thing that's going to make this trial a little longer. You see, in Lori's trial, the defense decided not to present a case. In other words, they thought that they would be better off in just attacking the case of the prosecution, and they did not present the case on their own. They just wanted to attack the prosecution. Every defendant has the right to do that. You don't have to present your own case. But we now know that Chad's lawyers, they're going to present a case. In fact, he said they're going to take the time to tell his story. Wonder what his story will be. We'll tell you about it. And so you can count, I believe, on almost 8 to 10 weeks. Now, my friend Chad Daybell has spent about 4 years now in jail, in the same very jail. Most defendants do not stay that long in a county jail. So let's all remember, the wheels of justice may turn slowly, but they do turn. And let's all think that justice will prevail. I believe it did in Lori's case, and hopefully will in Chad's case. But what do you think? Do you think Chad should get the death penalty? And what kind of defense do you think Chad's lawyers will put on? What kind of story will they tell in Chad's defense? Will they follow the line of Chad's children who got on TV and said that he was duped, that he was framed? What do you think? It's going to be interesting for sure. And we're going to do our very best to keep you updated as we cover this trial of the grave digger who wrote books and then found followers. One of those followers were Lori Daybell. Both he and Lori were married to different people, but they fell in love or lust. And in just 5 short months, 4 people in their circle died. Little JJ and Tylee, Lori's children. Charles Vallow, Lori's past husband, and Tammy Daybell, Chad's past wife, and a 5th person, the hitman himself in the center of the case, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, died from health problems. Well, my friend, it's a doozy. Stay tuned in as we continue to follow this. And so until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. If you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.